Hi everyone, we're live and here we go. Today we're going to talk about the different keys and the way they, not so much the different keys like all of the different keys, but the way different keys interact with each other, mainly in the sonata form. That's what we're looking at today. And we're going to look at the two Clementi sonatinas, the Opus 36 number 3 in C major, and we'll also look at the number 6 that we did in the one of the last live streams as well. But we're going to talk about different things. We're really going to talk about the way that the importance of those keys and the way they express the music. That's the most important thing, because the keys are basically interwoven into the structure of the music in general, and especially the sonata form. So that's always a very important thing to consider. And we're going to start with the one in C major. I don't know if you know that. This is really a beautiful sonatina. And we're just talking about the first movements here. I'm going to play through it, and maybe you can already start to pick apart a few things you already know about the sonata form. Of course, like you have two themes, right? And maybe more, the vaster picture of the sonata form is really the three sections you have: the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation. And what is the importance of that? And how do the keys, the different keys, play into that? If you know a little bit about the sonata form, well, then you know that we usually start and finish in the same key. In the exposition, we have two different keys, two different themes, I'm sorry, and they're usually in two different keys. Often very contrasting in character. And then, we end the exposition in a different key than we started. And we go into development, we have a lot of harmonic sequences, and eventually we come to the recapitulation, which is going to be essentially pretty much the same thing that you had in the exposition of your sonata, except you're not changing keys in the second theme. You're hearing the second theme in the same key. So we're going to talk about the importance of that. So we start out in C major. That's just a C major chord. Subdominant, back to tonic. Then we have this. Here's our dominant. We're still in C major. We feel that. We could just end right there and say this was it. Now, here comes something. Our second theme is coming. We're not quite there yet. 5 of 6, 6. But we stayed in C major here. We stayed in C major. That's very clear. We're in C major. And in this case, Clementi is not using, as we traditionally have in the sonata form, usually a modulating bridge. We call that a modulating bridge. A passage where we're going to modulate to our new key, in this case, G major. But he just goes directly into it, right? We're in C major, and then all of a sudden, we're in G major. He just kind of imposed that a little surprisingly almost. You hear that sort of thing. Isn't that kind of like we have in that Haydn sonata, C major? We're still on the dominant here of C major. But he just goes directly into G major. That's a different piece though, but a really awesome one. So this is kind of similar in a way, except he finished that phrase on the tonic and went to the dominant here. So the idea of the second theme is that, you know, music evolved from a discourse, from people talking and talking about things and ideas. So usually in a discourse you would present an idea and then present a counter argument to it. In this case, the second theme is very much like that. And we'll come back to this idea because the rest of the sonata form is the same. We have a development where we kind of develop those ideas and look at, well, how about this? How about that? And then eventually come to some kind of conclusion. And in order to do that, we're going to have to find an agreement between our thesis and antithesis, right? So it's like, what did we say? What words did I just use? An opposing idea, a differing idea, right? A counter argument, that's it. So we need some kind of resolution between our original argument and our counter argument somehow towards the end of that sonata, right? So here's our number one argument, or let's say idea or thing to say, statement. We're using, yes, certain, you know, musical elements like this sort of a bass line and a melodic line, sticking to simple chords. We can look at all that, but the most simple thing is just the key that we're in. We're in C major. That's the most simple thing. And we finished that. Now we have something different in another key. Maybe it is more sweet sounding in contrast to the beginning. It is a little bit contrasting. But more importantly, it's in a different key. G major. So our original key is kind of like home. And now we've gone somewhere else. We've gone to another planet. We're no longer in our home key. We're in G major. So eventually we have to get back home. We're having a little adventure here, but at some point we need to get back home before the end of the night. This is all in G major. That ends our first part of the sonata, the exposition. We started in C major and we finished in G major. And we had two different themes. That's the C major key and the G major key. C major and G major themes. Now we go into the exposition, in the development, I'm sorry. In the development, really what's happening is we're going to go through a bunch of keys, searching. We're kind of searching for something, and traditionally what we have is melodic and harmonic sequences. So like these things are, or very often we'll find some circle of fifths in there, or ascending harmonic sequences as well. So maybe we have a little bit of that in here. Let's see, let's see how, in this sonatina, short sonata, how much is Clementi keeping to that and what's going on. We finished that first part in G major and we start in G major. Right away we have a melodic sequence, right? Different steps. We're clearly not really in G major, right? It looks like we started there, but this is not going to hang around in G major. Now, the problem with the sonatina is that the sonatina, being a condensed sonata, the development is so short, we don't have really time to do harmonic sequences. So we have here what appears to be the theme. We've come back to C major. We're back in C major. It's the same as the beginning, an octave lower. bit different than what we had in the beginning. We still are having these, you know, harmonic sequences. But we have remained in C major. So very often, it's not the case in this sonata, but we have kind of a fake recap, but in a different key. You'll hear that in many, you know, a lot of Beethoven sonatas. You know, doesn't he do that in them? All of a sudden, we're in the development. We think we've come back, but we're in, I can't remember, maybe E flat major. I'm not even sure about that example, but that happens a lot. So here, it kind of looked like it, but no, this was a genuine recap. And the difference is that unlike the beginning, here's what we heard in the beginning. And we went to G major. Here we have very similar. This is exactly the same. Here's where it's different, right? Now we have. He's done it in such a way that he won't change keys. He won't end up in a different key than C major. We have a half cadence this time, finishing on the dominant chord. And we're. Now here is our second theme that we had in G major. And we have it, that was like our counter argument to, and now we have it in the original key. It's new. We heard the theme before, but we didn't hear it in the original key. And that's always the case in these sonata forms. It's only at the end of the sonata or the end of the movement that we get to hear that material in the original key. This is the same, by the way, whether it's, you know, in the Liszt sonata, which is half an hour long, it's the exact same thing. It's just spread out over so much more time, but the general form, at least that idea is the same. The general form is actually quite different in that sonata. But we do have... We do have that, you know, a theme in D major when the sonata was in B minor. And then eventually, finally, all the way at the end of the piece, we will eventually hear that material finally in the original key, a major version of the original key. So that's no different. So here we are, C major. And this, he does something a little different. Nice here. I love it. Instead of doing like before, probably because the pianos were smaller. So Clementi's pianos didn't go up to this note. And, you know, maybe it's something to be grateful for, because the things that the composers do that are a little different to accommodate for that, you know, handicap of the piano, well, it's really beautiful. I love it. Now we get the feeling at this point that, yes, the end is near. We're getting near the end. And that's an incredibly expressive thing. You know, after doing psychologists, one by the name of John A. Sloboda, and many others did studies on, you know, psychological studies with people listening to music and seeing how they could measure physiologically what they were experiencing, like, you know, emotions that manifest themselves as measurable physiological symptoms, like getting shivers or goosebumps or tears or the acceleration of the heart rate. But the really interesting thing about that, you know, is that they determined that the structure was the most expressive element in the music. The most expressive thing a performer can do for his audience is bring out the structure so that we understand the story that you're telling. So we get here to C major. And we really do have this feeling like we're getting very close to the end. And I love that feeling. It's one of my favorite things in music and the sonata form in general. So we didn't have that in the beginning, right? Because those keys were in contradiction to each other. What did we have? We had this. This was new territory. We were in G major, but we just started in C major. This was like an adventure. This here is like coming back home. Same music, different key, and in its context, this is coming back home.